Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America, where each episode we bring you a fresh and insightful interview featuring one of the film industry's top directors, conducted by one of their peers. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're enjoying The Director's Cut, please take a moment to rate and review us on iTunes or like us on SoundCloud. We love hearing your feedback. This episode takes us behind the scenes of director Rob Reiner's new biopic, LBJ, which charts the life of Lyndon B. Johnson from his young days in West Texas to becoming Senator John F. Kennedy's running mate after losing the 1960 Democratic presidential nomination. Sidelined after the election, the once powerful Senate Majority Leader finds himself and the world changed after Kennedy is assassinated and he is thrust into the presidency. In addition to LBJ, Mr. Reiner's credits include the feature films This Is Spinal Tap, The Princess Bride, Misery, and Ghosts of Mississippi, and the movies for television Sonny Boy, Likely Stories Volume 1, and Everyday Life. He is a 3-time nominee for the DGA Award for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Feature Film for Stand By Me, When Harry Met Sally, and A Few Good Men. Following a recent screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Mr. Reiner spoke with DGA President Thomas Schlamme about filming LBJ. During their conversation, Mr. Reiner discusses how making the film made him reevaluate LBJ as a political figure, why he describes the editing room as the confessional, and why he felt Woody Harrelson was perfect for the title role of the film.
Thank you.
I'm the president of the guild, and you got a bigger ovation than me.
Well,
that's because you made a great movie.
But you have a chance to negotiate and make sure I have a decent living.
Okay.
That's more important.
So, first, congratulations on the movie.
Thank you, Tommy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have to say, I saw this movie well over a year ago. Rob had a screening, and I was lucky enough to see it then. And I can tell you, I remember seeing the end of this movie and feeling so incredibly excited and really energized about the possibility of a Hillary Clinton presidency. It's true. And it was especially the end of the movie when you think about the end of this movie, and it's Kennedy is, we're just beginning, and Johnson is, let's continue. Kennedy is saying, I give you hope. And Johnson is saying, I'll give you results. And all I thought about was Barack and Hillary. And then history fucked us. And then I thought about that, and I thought about that's what history does. It's through the prism of what we see right now and who we are. And I think about this movie and you making this movie and your political activism, and, you are in the trenches for so many of the things this man fought for. And I thought about your evolution of, I just had this image that maybe, I didn't know you as a young man, but the words, hey, LBJ, how many babies did you kill today, came out of your mouth at one time in your life.
Absolutely.
And then I thought, here's this celebration of this fairly complicated guy. Take us on that journey, of how you got to this.
You're exactly right. I mean, I was, of draft age during the Vietnam War. So to me, LBJ was the enemy. I was against the war, and I hated him because he could send me to my death. And I marched, and, my mother was part of a group called Another Mother for Peace, which is a very famous anti-war group, and they had a very famous poster that said, war is unhealthy for children and other living things. And she helped design that poster. It was a very famous poster. So it was in my DNA to, just basically discard this guy. And to be honest, I didn't really think hard about him until somebody said, do you want to make there's this idea for a film about LBJ. There was a script that Joey Hartson wrote. And to be honest, I said, I don't know if I want to do this. I really don't. I had a certain feeling about LBJ, but I thought about it. I gave it a lot of thought, and I thought, I've been active, for many, many, many years in politics and working on public policy. And I actually had a job here in California for 7 years in the California government. And I started thinking about LBJ as what he was able to accomplish domestically, and if you look at his presidency, maybe second to only FDR, do you have greater domestic policy achievements? And I thought it's really like a tale of two presidencies. I mean, had it not been for Vietnam, I think Johnson would have gone down as one of the great presidents of all time. But we had Vietnam, and you can't take that away. But I thought, well, who is this guy? Who is this guy who was so capable and had such a great understanding of the nexus between politics, policy, and government, and how government worked? And who was he? And that guy who also got us, escalated the war in Vietnam. So I had read the Caro books. We had optioned the early Caro book, the
first one?
Means of Ascent. Yeah, that was. We actually tried to make a film out of it, and we couldn't quite get a screenplay that we liked. But I had read the Caro books, and then I read this book by Doris Kearns Goodwin, and that really gave me the insight into who this guy was and why I thought, okay, I can make this movie, because there were two things that I kind of teased out of that book. One was that he had this recurring nightmare, that he was paralyzed. And he had this dream over and over of being paralyzed. And I thought, that's interesting. Here's a guy that you think of as, aggressive, bull in the china shop, arm twisting to get his way. And yet he was frightened at times and paralyzed. And then I read this thing about his mother, his relationship to his mother. He had, it was conditional. She only would love him when he was doing the things that she wanted him to do, and she withheld her love at times. And I thought that's fascinating, because he grew up thinking that he wasn't loved. And I thought, wow, a politician, because all politicians want to be loved. Approval rating. That's what they want, is approval. And here was a guy who was frightened to death of not being loved, of being paralyzed at times and not being able to make a decision. Once he did, then he was, off to the races. But I thought, well, that's interesting, that's who this guy was. And so what's the best way to show who he is? Now, if you wanted to do a biography of Lyndon Johnson, you'd 10, 12 hours. You'd put on a miniseries and you could cover his entire life. But if you wanted to get to the essence of who he was as a person, I thought the best way in was the way we chose, which is to basically it takes place in 1 week. It's like, we do have flashbacks to when he was majority leader of the Senate, and we show, when he was vice president. But it really only takes place from the time Kennedy lands at Love Field till the time Johnson delivers that very famous speech. And once he becomes
president, you're in real time.
Yeah, it's all real time. So very shortly after he assumed the presidency, I said, so here's a guy who always wanted to be president, always wanted that, and was frightened to death of doing it. It has this incredible thing thrust upon him, and he's frightened to death about whether or not he's going to be loved. The Kennedys were loved. They're never going to accept him. And I thought that's the way to really, when a man's under pressure, that's where we can show who he really is.
Well, let me ask you something in the movie and it's because I also have read the Caro books. I'm from Texas. LBJ was, really a mythological figure, both good and bad, which I think you capture really well. You think a lot about this man, and you think about, do the ends justify the means? And because the ends were pretty noble. If you take out Vietnam, the ends were unbelievably noble. They were civil rights and social justice and everything that you work for today. The means weren't always so noble. The truth of it is, he stole the 1948 Senate election.
That was the Means of Ascent. That was the first book.
And that's what, And so if you'd read that, so just in your own sense of you knowing government and how difficult it is, how do you deal with that dilemma? in life?
Well, it's that cliche they always say of, you don't want to see legislation made. Right. It's like watching sausage being made. It's ugly. It's really ugly. But if you have someone who really has the skills to know how that works, you can actually move an agenda forward. But you have to accept that it is ugly, and it is the horse trading and knowing how to soft pedal somebody, how to push somebody hard and do it. And it has to be in your DNA. I mean, if you look at Johnson, he was born in a poor area of the Hill Country, West Texas Hill Country. He grew up in poverty. He taught at schools that were impoverished. He knew what that was. So when you look at people say, well, he had a change of heart about racism and about civil rights. No, I don't think so. I reading all that I have read, this guy never thought of himself as a Southerner. He thought of himself as a Texan and a Westerner. He was more than happy to assume that the mantle of being a Southerner to get things done. But when he was talking to Richard Russell, it was different than how he talked to the Kennedys, and he talks about that in the film. Yeah. And you can see when they all come, the Southern delegation comes to him and says, "Finally, we've got a Southerner the president." And he said, "Let's pray." And they're all praying. All these white guys sitting around praying, and Johnson's looking around like, "I'm not one of you. I have pretended to be one." And that's what he was great at. He was great at knowing how to arm twist and how to cajole. And he also knew when that's why he screamed at people, "I want a goddamn number. Don't tell me it's about 48. I need to know." He's not going to put it on the floor of the Congress unless he knows he can get it passed. And Kennedy couldn't get it passed. There were four presidents were fought. They couldn't get it done. We talked to some journalists who were there on Capitol Hill, and they said there was no way in a million years that Kennedy would have gotten that thing through because it wouldn't have even gotten out of committee. But Johnson realized, and by the way, even when Kennedy died, Johnson realized, I have an opportunity here. I've got a martyr, and I know how Congress works, and I'm going to get it to work. But even then, he knew he was going to lose the South, the Southern Democrats, and he also knew he needed Martin Luther King on the outside to keep pushing and keep giving him a drumbeat. So the way he was portrayed in Selma, to me, was not wrong. He did not run right away. He wasn't going to put it on the floor until it was there, and he knew he was spending an enormous amount of political capital to get it done. He said, we're going to lose the South for a decade. It turned out to be more than 5 decades, and we're now still looking at it. Look at it in Alabama. You've got a guy who is a pedophile, and they're going to choose him maybe over a Democrat because the Democrat's worse, and that flipped. During the Johnson era.
Well, here's the other reason
they became Republicans.
That the ends do sometimes justify the means, because in Selma, right before the Voting Rights Act, there were 14,000 white eligible voters, of which 9,900 were registered. There were 15,000 African Americans in Selma, and 325 people were registered. Right. So because of that act that he did, this man might lose that Senate seat, which I do believe he will lose.
Right.
But
and
that's why you think, okay, you have to struggle with this morally.
Yes,
and you do in the film, because Yarborough, it's really interesting, your sort of portrayal of Yarborough in the film. I mean,
he was a liberal.
Man who,
he was a liberal.
As in Texas, it was like he was the bastion of liberals.
Yeah.
He was but he had, you have this moment that you feel, voting your conscience, that Johnson thought it was absurd.
Yeah. You have a conscience, but you only vote when you know you're going to be able to get it done. Unless you want to be a backbencher your whole life, and that's fine. There are a lot of people whose roles are, I'm going to play in the backbench. I'm just going to, scream at the wind and do that. But then there are people who actually get stuff done. And those are the tough people that have to fight in the trenches to get it done. You talk about only those many people registered. I was talking to, at dinner tonight, I made a movie years ago, Ghost of Mississippi, and it was about the assassination of Medgar Evers by Byron de la Beckwith. And Merle Evers, who was a consultant on the film, gave me this. It was when we were promoting the film on Oprah Winfrey. She gives me this poll tax receipt that was in Medgar Evers' wallet the night he was assassinated. It still had blood stains on it. And she told me that the reason he carried it around, he was proud of the fact that he had enough money to be able to get, to be able to get the right to vote. And so, yes, it has the Southern strategy, and all of that has been going on for years, suppressing the vote, keeping people from voting. And we saw it even this last year when they stripped a big provision out of the Voting Rights Act, which Johnson passed in '65, basically saying, oh, it's all over. There's no more racism. There's no more reason that we have to make sure that blacks have an opportunity to vote. Well, there you have it. And now we've got this president, and this issue's rise right back up to the surface. The weird thing about this, I thought you were going to say, because you saw the film before, Trump was president, and now it's like we didn't change a frame. It's a different film, because you look at it through a different lens now. I mean, all that racism that was kind of submerged. I mean, I'm naive like anybody, we fought for, I remember where I was when Medgar Evers was shot, not just Kennedy, but, we fought, and then all of a sudden, you had Brown versus the Board of Education, you had the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, Loving versus Virginia, 1967, and then you had the biggest star on television was Oprah Winfrey, and Will Smith, the biggest star in movies, and then Barack Obama, the first African-American president. You think, well, we're on a glide path. Now we're moving and to where our country is going to be realized. And then this guy comes along and basically with a big bullhorn says, racists, come on out and vote. It was not good to say what you felt. Now all of a sudden he's giving voice to all of that racism that lay dormant underneath. And it's original sin of this country, and here we are. But I believe that we are fighting the last battle of the Civil War. It's like when we were talking just before we got out here, we were talking about all of a sudden sexual harassment has become an issue. Well, it's been there forever. But now, all of a sudden, for whatever reason, because of Harvey Weinstein or whatever, now it's something we can talk about. And so hopefully you can move forward and start changing our cultural norms. And I'm hoping that in a weird way, Donald Trump, not just from the sexual harassment part, but from the racist part, that he actually has caused a good thing to happen in a weird way. I mean, we've got to get rid of this guy before he destroys us too much, but at least this is now being front and center again, and we're having this conversation.
No, I do think bringing all this to the surface. I will also say for the film, there's more for me than just the civil rights issue in the film that you look through the lens of Trump. I mean, the incredible sense of partisanship. I mean, that there is nobody now who could try their best to engage in any legislation that could move forward, as well as, and look, we did this on the West Wing, you did it on American President. There's also still a celebration of the institution. Yes. Visually the film is beautiful. It shows that sense of when he goes into that Oval Office the first time. And this man has done so much damage to that also. Right. So you watch the film and sort of go, wow, that man is in that same office. It's a really difficult process.
Right. And what you think about when you look at who we have there now is the presidency destroyed? Is democracy being destroyed? Well, it's being damaged, certainly being damaged in a major way through for a lot of reasons. And part of it is Russia has infiltrated, and they're, eating away at the fabric of democracy. But I still believe that if you had a really powerful leader come to office, not just be somebody who you can be attracted to and be drawn to, but somebody who has the skills that Johnson had to really understand how government works, to really understand how policy and politics intertwine. We could put this country back on the right footing, but it'll take somebody like that because we have been damaged, severely damaged by this guy.
No, you hope that from all of this, we will right our sails in a much stronger and much more powerful path.
Right,
you know.
right.
So let me ask you some filmmaking questions.
Okay.
You know, because we are at the DGA. And
Yes.
I just as soon. And by the way, this is the first conversation I think you and I have ever had without food in our mouth. You know, because we go to dinner together.
It's
we're friends.
true. We have dinner all the time. And you eat very nicely.
Oh, thank you so much.
You always order good things.
I'm supposed to say the same, but anyway.
I'm a slob. Luckily, I don't have anything on my shirt.
Let's talk about Woody for a second.
Yeah.
You know, was Woody attached to the film? Did you go, I'm reading all the Caro books, I'm thinking about LBJ, Woody Harrelson.
And that was the thinking and when everybody.
Because he's brilliant.
I know, he's great. And when people ask me, you know, they said, what's the next film? I said, well, LBJ. And they said, well, who plays LBJ? I said, Woody Harrelson. They said, no. What? Woody Harrelson? He can't be that. I said, wait till you see the film. Wait till you see what he's able to do. And he was my first choice. I wanted him, not only because he's from Texas and he's got a good sense of humor, which we had some humor in the film, but he's got humanity, and I wanted to capture who LBJ was, not just, like I say, the bull in the china shop kind of guy, but who is this guy? And he has a sensitivity, and I knew he could play those scenes that he plays so beautifully. The one with Jennifer Jason Leigh when they're in the bed together, that to me is a crucial scene in terms of, you know, finding out who this guy is. And so I wanted Woody from the get-go.
Well, he's amazing, and part of that is that you do love him right away. I mean, here's a guy who's tough and aggressive, and you know, going to the bathroom in front of people, and I'm still not quite sure why he needed to shut the door, because
he was
shut it sooner.
I know, but I know he was taking his pants up, so maybe he didn't want that.
I just love that he has some line somewhere, line. But you know, I also think there's a humanity in Russell too. I think the casting of Jenkins, I mean, he's unbelievable in the movie.
Yeah, Richard Jenkins.
Richard Jenkins, because that's a love affair. I mean, that was really, Russell was saying, this is the man who's going to take the mantle. He will be. And when he hugged him, it was a really touching moment.
Yeah,
and you didn't feel that Woody was judging it. He felt like, I am in a predicament with somebody that I deeply, deeply care. And that's why I leaned over to you at that last scene between the two of them. I just love that scene. It's a complicated scene. Yeah. It's a deep scene of betrayal. And Jenkins just won't back down. I mean, Russell won't back down.
And Russell was a racist through and through. And he was also like a mentor to LBJ. You know, he was there before LBJ. LBJ came to Congress when FDR was president, and he supported everything that FDR was in favor of. And Russell did to some degree, but not when it come to
And when you were
racial
casting,
things.
did you think of people looking like people, or?
You know, a little bit. But, you know, he looks a little bit like, I try to get, you know, somewhat, but I mean, you're not going to be able to, you know, you're better off trying to get somebody who can play the part. And Richard Jenkins, to me, it's like he's what I call an unsweaty actor. And you know what that is? Absolutely. A guy who never pushes anything. It's just all right there, and it's all real, and it just comes out. And Woody was saying, and this is something as an actor I always felt like, whenever you're playing a scene with somebody that good, it's like playing tennis against somebody who can hit the ball back to you. You know you're going to get it. You're going to get it in a good spot, and you're going to be able to hit it back.
And so you feel that in those scenes, and with Jennifer Jason too.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you something about Richard Russell, and this is something I try to figure out about him because I read all this stuff about him, and I asked Bill Moyers. You know, Bill Moyers was LBJ's press secretary, and I asked him. I said, I want to ask you something. And maybe tell me what you think. I said, do you think that Richard Russell was gay? And he said, you might be onto something. And I said, well, because first of all, he never married. He was never married. And what I had read is that on Sundays, you know, there were guys who would go back to their districts on the weekend, and there were guys who stayed in town. They didn't have wives. They didn't have people to go see. And every Sunday, Lady Bird would invite, she'd make a big brunch, and she'd have Richard Russell and Sam Rayburn and J. Edgar Hoover would all come over. And they all had brunch every Sunday. And so I said,
and wear Lady Bird's clothes.
Yeah, and wear Lady Bird's clothes, yes. So I always thought that, and I don't, and I did one little thing. It just goes by so quickly in the film. Nobody really notices that they're standing up on the catwalk when they're overlooking the planes that are being built, And Johnson's got the picture of Bobby Kennedy on the cover of Life magazine, and he says, "Damn, number 2 man in Washington." And he says, and Russell says, "Don't worry, Attorney General's never become president." He says, "Well, there's a lot of things these Kennedys do that nobody else has done." And then Russell takes the thing and says, "Yeah, good-looking boy." He says that. He says, "Yeah, good-looking boy."
The structure of the film, was that in the original script? The first half of it was sort of.
Yeah, we knew that we were going to use the framework of the assassination, that it was all going to be based around that, and we were going to flash back from the time he lands at Love Field. We flash back, and basically it's this arc of him having to assume the presidency. And just from a filmmaking standpoint, and you'll appreciate it, because you always wonder when you're doing something, are you going cheesy? Are you doing something that's really cheesy?
Why did you say I would know?
No,
I'm trying.
No. I mean, you try to pull back from the cheese, But there's that moment, and this has actually happened. I mean, he was in that hospital room, and that's exactly what happened. They kicked the person who was in the room out. That actually happened. But he's in the hospital room, and Kenny O'Donnell comes in to tell him that, Kennedy has died. And Malcolm, who's, Johnson's press secretary, comes over and says, "Mr. President," and all the eyes turn to Johnson, because and he's sitting there in the chair, and all of a sudden he realizes, I'm the president now. And I put the camera down here, because I wanted him to stand up like, he became the president, and he was and I said, I don't know, I do this, but it kind of works.
I actually wrote, I love that moment.
Okay.
Because it was also the only close-up in a white element.
Yes.
You had a white element on him,
right
so
it
was kind of great.
He looked bigger. He
great.
loomed.
But you weren't thinking when you were shooting, were you trying to make transitions, or did you just sort of, you have the Yarborough, there's a moment where Yarborough's head turns.
That we found in the cutting room.
Right.
That was not something that I had planned, but we did find it in the cutting room where he turns his head, and it worked.
Right.
And those things, sometimes you find those things. I remember when I did Spinal Tap.
Sometimes you design them too.
Yeah, no, I know. Listen, you try to design them, and then sometimes they just, look at that. In Spinal Tap, I had a great moment where we always had the drummers were always dying in some kind of strange way, And so at one point they go to Japan, and you see the drummer who's drumming, and all of a sudden there's a big explosion, and then you cut to there's another drummer is there, and we found the explosion on the other side. It wasn't on the first side of the cut; it was on the other side. There was a pyrotechnic thing that was on stage in Japan, and we cut it in such a way it looked like the guy in the front end got exploded. So you find those little things.
The third movie you make.
The
movie that's written, the movie you shoot, and the movie that you act.
Well, that's the cutting room, is the confessional.
Right.
Where you sit in there.
And did you change some of the, and the stock footage, was that also in the?
We had most of the stock footage. We had certain sections that we knew were going to be, archival footage.
And was there ever a discussion of trying to match that in shooting?
No, because we didn't. We kind of removed it from the film, and it was kind of sitting. Sometimes it was on television, but for the most part, it was sitting out by itself. There was one thing we did add. We added the whole section of the Freedom Riders. That wasn't in the film, where, we see Brown versus the Board of Education. We see people at the lunch counter and the Freedom Riders. That we didn't have in there. We added that later because we felt we needed to add something to get us back into the cars arriving at Parkland. So that one we found, but the rest were in there, yeah.
And historically, the film, for instance, did they watch the Cronkite on the plane?
Yeah.
Did that happen?
Yeah.
They all waited for
Yeah.
Cronkite before?
Yeah.
Wow. It was very moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
how much
I don't. I watched Cronkite. I mean, when I was a
I just
kid.
didn't know that they were waiting for Cronkite to sort of. It was this moment.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't wait for Cronkite, but I mean, they did see him. The TV was on in the plane.
Right, but because he had said, you feel that in the film, you know, because he's saying, "I'm not doing it until the nation knows." And did you have other things in it that you felt that weren't completely historical that you thought?
What you never know is
we don't know what their conversations
what they exactly said.
No.
But oddly enough, you do know some of it because there are a lot of tapes of Johnson. I mean, when he orders the pants, you can hear that recording.
And I will say, for anyone who hasn't, I remember getting those tapes. When we were doing West Wing, somebody sent me those tapes, and I would sit in the garage waiting, not going in, because I just wanted to hear more of them. They're extraordinary.
There's an incredible tape. If you go to LBJ Library, if you're ever in Austin, it's great. It's a great library. And you go there, and you can pick up the phone. There are a bunch of phones, and you can hear Johnson talking, to different people. And one of us, a conversation with Jackie Kennedy, which is unbelievable, a week after Jack died. And it's like an amazing conversation.
Sergeant Shriver, do you remember?
Sergeant Shriver. Well, Sergeant Shriver started the Peace Corps.
Remember the Peace Corps? And he's saying no. And
he said, no, you're doing it. You're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Sergeant Shriver was basically, helped him architect the Great Society, the War on Poverty, the Head Start program, and Medicare, Medicaid, and so on.
So here's another moment that I really admired as a filmmaker in there was the staging of the two scenes with the Kennedys back to back, when John comes to ask him to be vice president, and he's backlit, and they're very comfortable, and they're sitting in the chair, and it's a beautiful two-shot. And then you have Bobby, who's just right at the door. I'm not letting you come inside. They're under this sort of
light. They stay off in the distance too.
So it was really wonderful.
Yeah, thanks.
Any Johnsons see this?
Well, that was the best thing for me. I mean, the first thing, one of the first screenings we had was at the LBJ Library, and Lucy Baines was sitting right there in the first row, and I was so nervous. I thought, oh my God, we're showing her father and her father's relation to her mother. And we finished the film, and Woody Harrelson and I walk on stage. There's going to be a Q&A like this. And the guy starts to ask me a question. I said, well, wait a minute, before you ask me, I just got to hear, what is Lucy, what did you think of this? And she stood up. I don't know if you know her. She's very petite, very small, and she's a very formal lady. And she got up and she said, the man I saw on the screen tonight was the man I knew. And I went, okay, I don't care what anybody else says. I'm fine with that. And then later I talked with her, and she said, and you're the first person to ever be able to capture the way my mom and dad were with each other. They were like that with each other.
It was probably because there was such a soulful nature to Woody, and you did feel an insecurity. You did feel a guy who grew up in the hill country with nothing.
Yeah, and she was richer than he was. She actually funded his first campaign.
But he got very rich. Before he became president, he was the richest person ever.
He had like $14 million.
And had nothing. Yeah. And it's one of the reasons that I also think, and I think about politics today and the politicians today and him, he saw how government can help people.
Yes.
I mean, he brought electricity to the hill country. There was no electricity in the hill country. So I think
Clean Air Act and Clean Water
What he
Act.
always did for the downtrodden was that he knows it worked. And that's why, I don't know, I guess he was not racist before, even though he voted strictly that way.
But he did pass a civil rights bill,
But I know he knew people
one,
needed help, and that government can help people, and that was really great.
Well, he came from FDR. Thank you very much, you guys.
Wait, I have one more question. I have one more question. So, given the fact that we are living in this world that we're living in right now, what's the biggest takeaway for you for the film?
The two takeaways. One is we talked about, which is the fact that now, there's been a lot of great movies made about race relations and civil rights. Selma was one, 12 Years a Slave. I mean, there's a lot of great movies. And this wasn't intended to be, all about that, as you said. But because of the time we're living in, all of a sudden, this issue becomes hopefully part of the conversation. No film, I don't think, can ever change anything, but it can be part of the conversation, and hopefully that's one. And the other one is, look, government can work. It can work. And there it is for somebody who understands how it works to make it work. And hopefully people will
And it can really work when people who are there actually believe in it.
Yes.
So,
and know and read the Constitution.
And speaking of believing in it, thank you for being the filmmaker
Tommy.
that you
Thank
are
you,
and for
Tommy.
the activism
Thank
that you
Tommy.
do. You bet.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. If you'd like to hear more, you can find past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts. And stay tuned for more episodes, including Ridley Scott's All the Money in the World, and our upcoming Meet the Nominees series, which will feature panel discussions with DGA Award-nominated feature film and documentary directors. Be sure to click subscribe so you won't miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please like, share, and leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.